Let the women learn in silence with all subjection, but suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. Notwithstanding she shall be saved in childbearing, if they continue in the faith and charity, with holiness and sobriety. Good afternoon. How are you guys doing today? We're going to be talking about that verse because it's a pretty crazy statement that Paul seems to be making there. I've seen it taken out of context a whole bunch of times, and men, unfortunately, over the centuries have used it as an excuse to push women down into places of complete uselessness in the church because they're not allowed to speak, they're not allowed to talk, and it's just been used to abuse them. So I want to straighten a couple things out today. First of all, Paul, he's writing to Timothy, who is in Ephesus. Ephesus was a spiritual playground. It was crazy wacky. There were mystery religions, mystery cults all over the place. One of the big ones was one called the cult of Diana or Artemis. Basically, it was a woman worshipping cult, which was a form of Gnosticism. So what happened was these Gnostics took the Bible, they took Genesis account, and they basically said that rather than being deceived, Eve actually gained knowledge from the serpent. The serpent came to her in the garden, gave her a whole bunch of enlightenment, gave her a whole bunch of amazing knowledge, and liberated her and set her free. And so women in that cult were extremely high up, extremely, they held the high places, right? One of the other beliefs of the Gnostics was that all spirituality was good, everything spirit's good, and all physical is bad. So that means that matter is bad, spirit's good, knowledge is what liberates you, knowledge comes from the snake, so there was lots of snake worship, all sorts of stuff like that. So with a little bit of context about what's going on in Ephesus, let's tackle this scripture again. So, first thing I'd like to point out, in verse 8, Paul starts talking about men in general. He says, here's some stuff for men. I will therefore that men pray everywhere. General instructions for men. Verse 9, in like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel. There's practical advice for women. So he goes men in general, women in general, but in verse 11 he says, let the woman learn in silence with all subjection, but I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority. Usurping authority really paints the picture that somebody was jumping up in the middle of a service and shouting and stealing the microphone, if you can put it in those terms, from whoever was up there giving their message. So with this stuff in mind, what a lot of scholars do, they take this verse and rather than just reading it as like this command that women need to be quiet, what they suggest is that Paul is actually addressing a single woman here who was probably raised in the cult of Diana, who came from Ephesus and all the mystery religions. She probably believed that women had been given this key of knowledge, and so when she saw a man up there speaking, she stood up and shout him down. She would usurp authority from him. So Paul's not instructing all women everywhere they need to be silent. They shouldn't teach, they shouldn't have authority, but they should be just put in silence. That's not what Paul's saying here. Paul specifically states, let the woman learn in silence with all subjection, but I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. In verse 13 and 14, he gets really into the doctrine. He's actually correcting doctrine here. This is why he says this. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. So Paul's making it clear, look guys, Eve wasn't receiving some special download of knowledge. She got deceived. So Paul says clearly, let the woman learn in silence with all subjection, and I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. So he's saying this woman who's been jumping up and screaming and trying to tell everybody about these Gnostic beliefs, she should sit down and be quiet, and she should just keep her mouth shut and not try to control the service and try to interrupt everybody. He's looking more for order and just for some class rather than saying all women everywhere need to be quiet. And secondly, here's the weird one, the really weird one. In verse 15, notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith and charity and holiness with sobriety. So here, Paul is also dealing with the doctrine that this woman was probably bringing to the church. Paul says she shall be saved in childbearing. One of the beliefs of Gnostics, different sects of the Gnostics, was that if you were a woman and you had a child, you were creating matter. You were bringing physicalness into the world, so you were actually doing a disservice. You were actually birthing evil. You were using your body as a vessel to bring vanity and matter and evil physical stuff into the world. A baby's not a spirit, so why would you have a baby? And so all Paul's saying here is she shall be saved in childbearing. Other translations say through childbearing. Paul's saying if you have kids, you're not damning your soul to hell. You're not putting your salvation up for grabs. You're not putting God off. You're not making him mad. You shall be saved in childbearing. That's just the way it is. Because Paul was dealing with a specific teaching from a specific person. That's what this chunk of scripture is about. So guys, I just want you to know, if you've ever read this or people have ever used this against you, specifically ladies, to shut you up, or you felt like you don't have the right to say anything and you need to be submissive to the man and keep quiet, that's not what Paul's saying here. Paul's saying that, man, this one crazy chick who's been jumping up in services and lying to everybody needs to sit down. First of all, the woman was deceived. She didn't receive insight and special knowledge. Second of all, you're not going to hell if you have babies. Guys, that's the whole shebang. That's what Paul is saying. So I just want you to know that you're free here. You're free to be a minister, to stand up in church, to love other people, to speak, to have authority. It's awesome. So just be blessed. Have a good night.